They are the most precious reptiles of Mauritius. They are the witnesses of time. They lived among dodos and giant tortoises. They're a link to a glorious past when man was not even aware of the existence of the Mascarene Islands in the Indian Ocean. Today, these reptiles survive on islets around Mauritius. They are closely monitored. Out of the 9,500 species of reptiles around the world, they are among the most fragile. Their habitat is threatened. Climate change, disasters, and predators. The Telfair skink, the Bokeh skink, the Nactus night geckos, Keeled Scaled Boa are protected species. But out there, animals such as ants, rats, cats, minor birds, crows, leurs, the Madagascar giant day gecko, to name just a few species that people have introduced, are a dangerous threat to the existence of the wildlife of Mauritius. The survival of Mauritian reptiles is a relentless fight. For decades, conservationists have been on their edge to try to restore as much as possible the unique biodiversity of Mauritius. The untold story you're about to follow is an account of missions undertaken in 2011 and 2012 on various islets around mainland Mauritius. Join us and discover what it takes to restore lost worlds and ensure the survival of endemic specimens. It's early morning and Plaisance Airport is busy, with many arrivals from Asia and Europe. One flight is of particular interest. It comes from London and brought not only passengers, but also reptiles, carefully packed in a wooden box. Dr. Nick Cole leads Durrell's reptile restoration work in Mauritius, while being based in Mauritius with the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation. He lives in Pointe d'Esny, only a few kilometers away from the airport. In 2002, he came to Mauritius for his PhD research on the impact of invasive reptiles. From this, he established a program with the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation and the National Parks and Conservation Service to rebuild the threatened reptile communities on the islets around Mauritius.
This is a subadult or juvenile. It's not adult size yet. It's very, very small.
Look safe and sound.
Yeah, they look very well, which is very good. We're coming on a long journey. So this is a young male lesser night gecko. So it's come all the way from Jersey in the UK, from the Durrell Wildlife Conservation Trust.
This is where they came from, Jersey, England. In 1963, Gerald Durrell founded the Jersey Wildlife Preservation Trust. Its one mission: save species from extinction. Its symbol is the dodo, the iconic bird that was unique to Mauritius and that sadly was nowhere to be found only decades after men set foot on Mauritius. The challenge today is to avoid any similar fate with other species. The trust is located at Les Leurs Manor on the Isles of Jersey in the English Channel. It is a sanctuary where scientists breed threatened species. This is where the lesser night geckos come from. In 2009, specimens were collected from Île aux Vacois and sent to Durrell's Jersey Zoo, where they were bred for release back in the wild.
So you can see this is a male because of the hemipenes here, but this is an adult. You can see that they're quite swollen.
So you imagine how small the babies actually are.
So is that an egg in there?
Now they are ready to come back home.
There we go. So we have 6 eggs in this tub here. And you can see these are really nice and healthy. You can see the dark. These are very new eggs, the way they're light, but this one's got a gecko inside, and you can see it's gone much darker in colour. So this is probably soon to hatch, and this one here as well. But each gecko only produces 1 egg at a time, each female. And you can see the size of the gecko, they're very small. And for the size of the egg, it's quite large. So they put a lot of investment into producing this egg.
Good news will be sent to Durrell, although there is some casualty, unfortunately. It's time to prepare for a delicate leg of this operation. The geckos will be released this same evening, but there is still much to do.
So I just want to take one of these individuals. There's 2 males and 2 females. Oh, they're very lively. So this is adult size. I'll just turn over and see what sex. Okay, this is a female, and she's actually got an egg inside her. So this is fantastic for releasing these individuals, because they'll lay their eggs and we'll very soon have youngsters coming into the population. I'm just going to check her over to make sure she's got all of her toes, there's no damage to her feet. There's no tail breaks, so she's in very good condition. I'll just take the snout to vent length, and so it's measuring from the base of the tail up to the tip of the nose. And the reason we're measuring the tail is that geckos can, or all reptiles can lose their tails. Gives us an indication of the levels of predation or predation attempts upon the geckos. Okay. So she's 2.2.
2.2.
Yeah. Now identifying each individual is very difficult, especially when we're working with, say, 100 or 200. To know who this is exactly, we need to look at the pattern on their back, and this is like a fingerprint. We've had developed recognition software. So what I need to do is take a photograph of her dorsal pattern, and I need to make sure that this is in focus. Next time we capture her, we need to be able to identify that we've caught her before, to be able to compare these measurements over time to see whether she's losing weight or whether she's gaining weight. And of course we want them to gain weight or maintain their weight, and this lets us know that they're finding enough food.
The one that I've labeled as recap is a picture of the gecko that Nick just measured. These animals are endemic to Mauritius. They are found nowhere else apart from Mauritius. And some of them are not even found on the mainland anymore because they got extinct because of predators. And they are found on isolated island, like on Île Vacua, on one island. And they are really unique animals. And if we don't do anything for them, they'll just most likely go extinct in a couple of years. We have a database where we re-enter all the measurement data. The number of tail break, number of missing toes, all the data that will help us to identify the individual geckos. The software will make a 3-dimensional model of the pattern of the gecko. And then when we recapture the gecko, we can compare the different patterns to see if we have caught the same gecko again.
That same day in the afternoon, we leave Pointe Desny for Île Marianne. The southeast of Mauritius has a highly protected network of interconnected coral islets. Île de la Passe, Île Vacua, Île Fouquet, known as Île Phare, and Île Marianne form the southeastern islet national parks and nature reserves. They fall under the responsibility of Mauritius's National Parks and Conservation Service, Mauritius's Forestry Service, and the Ministry of Arts and Cultural Heritage. The Mauritian Wildlife Foundation works with these institutions to restore these islands. Île Marianne is about to become the new home of the lesser night gecko, once found on multiple islets and on the mainland, but now restricted to just a small strip of rock on Île Vacqua and a couple of islets in the north. Small steps on this April 2011, a stepping stone for conservation.
These eggs were laid in Jersey, so when we brought the parent, we also brought the eggs together with them. And here they're giving them a chance to hatch in the wild and adapt to the place where they've been laid. And by doing this, we are also increasing the population when they are going to hatch, and maybe these will adapt more than what we released, because they are born on site. So here we have a small tub devised specially to accommodate the eggs that we've just received from Jersey. And as you can see, it's quite easily done. These holes supposed to give him aeration, and down there for water to drip outside. We've also got a cover and small apertures for the gecko when they hatch to get out, but also will prevent, because of the size, it will prevent crab and other mammals or anything to get in and to predate on the eggs. And inside the tub, we have sterile perlite where Dr. Cole is going to place the eggs so that they can hatch after 2 to 3 weeks.
We are here at night because it is the most suitable time for them. If we release them in the daytime, they are at risk of predation by birds because they will not have time to find a refuge. So we release them at night, and we are hoping that because we have selected the spots to put them in very, very carefully, we have ensured they are as healthy as possible and screened them repeatedly before release, they should survive very, very well. One of the reasons that we needed to be able to do this in the UK, not here, is because the threats of invasive species are still present even on the mainland. So, for instance, the small geckos that people see inside their houses on the walls at night are one of the very biggest threats to these small geckos. And any other mammals, such as rats and cats, are also a problem. We're very confident that this is a suitable place to release because we have done extensive work. Before deciding to do a release like this, we investigate the area, we choose a secure location and make sure that it has suitable habitat. We had to identify individual crevices for the geckos to actually live inside. We had to ensure there were the right kind of plants, the right kind of insects, and all of these things had to be surveyed before we would even consider doing a project of this sort.
While mainland Mauritius has lost 60% of reptile diversity due to human-related impacts, the northern islets are sanctuaries. They house 10 species of Mauritian reptiles, 11 species of seabirds, and at least 48 species of endemic Mauritian plants. These islands are fascinating for the eyes and a wonder for scientists, as they retain components of what Mauritius used to be like prior to the arrival of humans some 500 years ago. They're all different one from the other. Gunner's Coin, Flat Island and its satellite Gabriel Island, and Pigeon's Rock, Round Island, Serpent Island. From Flat Island, we can appreciate their different landscape. Flat Island is located around 11.5 kilometers north of Cap Malheureux, the mainland's northernmost point. In April 2011, conservationists from National Parks and Conservation Service and Mauritian Wildlife Foundation spent a week to assess the impact of tourism on the island. One reptile in particular is of interest, the orange-tailed skink. But first, let's have a look at the temporary nursery.
Ici, c'est notre nursery, un petit pépinière qu'on a aménagé sur l'île plate ici. Tout ça, ce sont des plants endémiques. Là, vous avez le dracena. Et le but, c'est d'essayer de recréer une forêt indigène. Parce qu'on a des lézards, des reptiles, ils aiment ce type d'habitat. Et ils aident pour polliniser les différents plants. On essaie de recréer l'écosystème existant qui était là dans le passé. Auparavant, on avait seulement des plants endémiques. Il y avait des reptiles, des lézards, le orange tail. Mais après, avec l'activité humaine, c'est envahi maintenant avec l'acacia, comme vous voyez là, l'acacia, très envahissante. Mais nous, notre but à National Park Conservation Service, avec la collaboration du ministère, avec le Russian Wildlife, c'est de recréer une forêt indigène. On a sémé des graines, la tanière bleue de l'île Ronde. C'est un travail continu.
One can imagine how hard it is to restore endemic vegetation on an area of 625 acres. This is the largest islet off the Mauritian coast, used as a quarantine station during the 19th century.
Just one of many invasive plants. We've got little barbs on the end that stick into clothes, or even if you've got seabirds. It's very problematic. It's spread a lot of places.
This is how all of these plants get to different places.
Right now, we head towards the automated lighthouse, built in 1855. The team hopes to see the vanishing orange-tailed skink. The orange-tailed skink was first discovered in 1995 and was only known from Flat Island. Given the perceived threat to the skink being found only on one islet that is open to the public and tourism, the team translocated a small number of orange-tailed skinks to the closest islet nature reserve, Gunner's Coin, in 2008, where a second population of this unique Mauritian animal has now established, reducing its risk of extinction if the population on Flat Island can no longer be found. Increased activity on Flat Island in 2009 and 2010 led to the accidental introduction of shrews, known as ramusqués, a small predatory mammal that has decimated Flat Island's reptile community.
Donc là, on va faire surveiller mon orange-tailed skink, qui est endémique à l'île Maurice. Et mon orange-tailed skink, quand on a un habitat comme ça, quand on a un lit flatté, et mon roche-mou comme ça. Donc, qu'est-ce que je vais cacher au bas là plutôt. Donc, quand on fait autre donc nous voulons un point doucement, vu qu'il est marre beau pour surfer. Donc, nous voulons un point, checker bien ce pénal.
By the end of the afternoon, we have not found any trace of this threatened species, despite extensive searches over the past month. We go back to base camp and debrief.
Much more weed to be around here. You know which sites? The only place that we could go is right up around the north before we leave and actually just search around the buildings.
Windy?
Windy.
2011
2011
till 2015.
2015.
Cloud cover 100%.
100%.
After a light meal and some rest, we follow the team on a night expedition. Some reptiles are only seen at night. Our first encounter is a familiar gecko, but it would have been better if it was not there at all.
Unfortunately for small animals like this, we cannot get rid of them. This is an adult. As you can imagine, the babies are much smaller. They can get into gaps of just 1 millimeter in width, and so very, very difficult to actually find. And they can occur at very high densities as well. So to remove them once they're established is impossible. And this is why it's so important to make sure that species like this don't get to places that where they haven't already arrived, because they can cause so much damage and wipe out some of our unique Mauritian species. But many people will be familiar with this gecko because it's a house gecko. The common name is the common house gecko or Asian house gecko. The Latin name is Hemidactylus phonatus. And so a lot of the mess that you see down your walls in your houses in Mauritius is caused by this gecko. And you quite often hear it calling at night. It's a very distinctive sound, very, very vocal gecko. So many people will be aware of this. But it doesn't always live in houses, unlike its name says. And as we see it here in vegetation, and this is where it starts causing a problem.
Next is a spot where a population of lesser night geckos used to be found. But due to the introduction of the shrew, the small geckos can no longer be found, emphasizing the importance of reintroducing them back to the islets where they used to exist, such as we saw earlier on Île Marianne. But how do the team track the number of each reptile species on islands to know if the population sizes are increasing or decreasing? This is one of the numerous techniques that they use.
Rupert's just preparing now to walk transect lines, which we've set out across the rocks where the last place where we can find the Nactus. So he's going to walk. We have 6 transect lines, so he's going to walk these lines and measure the distance to each gecko that he sees. And from this we can calculate the population for this area here. But because the area is so small, previous estimates that we've made for the population on Flat Island only around 60 individuals or so. So it's a very, very tiny remnant population. And these geckos were once found throughout Mauritius, all over Flat Island and many of the other islands around. But with the introduction of the house gecko, we've lost all of these populations. And this is a very small, very isolated fragment of what remains. This is a bit of rock that's fallen down from the cliff probably a long time ago. And this is a sort of rock that the house gecko can't climb on. Of course it would be able to climb along all this vegetation, but it is just incredibly crumbly, and it's you can't see it, but between my fingers it's just like this really fine dust. And when we look under the microscope at this type of substrate, it's like little flat discs, and so when the gecko walks on it, it gets its toes completely covered in these tiny little flat discs, and then it just can't grip, and they slide off the side, so they just can't climb on this type of substrate. But this rock is called tough rock, and it's actually volcanic, so it's compacted ash from when Mauritius was first formed, when it was a large volcano. And so you've got small bits of basalt in here, but much of all of this is compacted ash, and it's because of this that these geckos have survived on this island. A lot of these small geckos live in these little crevices and cavities, and the trouble is the house gecko can get into these if it managed to climb on this rock, but it can't. But if it was just normal basalt or roche noire, the house gecko can climb in and push the endemic geckos out. And then the endemic geckos are more prone to predation. In heavy rains they drown, and there's no room for the small Mauritian gecko. So what we're doing now is just assessing this population to make sure that it's safe and to make sure there's no problems. This house gecko, I just found it running up this vine here, and as you can see the vine has grown down across the rocks where we get the endemic gecko. So we want to try and, as much as we can, manage this by removing mostly exotic plants like this here. this is Lantana camera, which grows very quickly and of course allows access for geckos to get onto this sort of rock. So in the next couple of days we'll be removing all of this invasive vegetation to stop the house geckos getting onto the Nactus rocks.
The view is mesmerizing, and you can't get enough of it. But while we wonder at this small gift from nature, we are still saddened by the apparent disappearance of the orange-tailed skink, the lesser night gecko, and at the time of filming, another Mauritian lizard, the Bokeh skink, was soon after to disappear from the island because of the introduction of the shrew.
Come on, Root, we've got to get on. Have you got the transit line and also the tape measure? Do you have GPS? No, okay, I've got one, so we can use that. And notebook? Great, okay, let's crack on. Makes you wonder what those tiny little caterpillars are, the ones that loop.
Nick Cole and Rupa are heading towards what's left of the hospital built for the quarantine station. A whole village was established on Flat Island. Today, it's in ruins. Once a playground for reptiles, but now they're introduced a non-Mauritian predator, the shrew. On each island trip, the team sets traps to determine if any other invasive animals have arrived, such as rats.
Just check that it works. Yeah. So this trap is set specifically for rats. The treadle is quite hard, so crabs are not heavy enough to press on this to make it set. So we've set this so you need quite a large body mass or quite a large body weight of an animal to actually press this treadle to close the trap. And this allows us not to keep trapping crabs which were coming in for this fish bait here, and it's really smelly, so any rat within the region, if rats were here, would smell this and find this irresistible. Fortunately, we haven't trapped rats on this island. Rats were on this island up until 1998. After rats were eradicated, we saw a very sharp increase in the abundance of reptiles on the island. Yeah, Ornate Day Gecko. So this is the Ornate Day Gecko. It's endemic to Mauritius. You find it around coastal areas of mainland Mauritius, but the main populations are on islands where we get them in very high densities. But these geckos are very important pollinators. They also disperse seeds because they eat fruits, and also prey to a lot of the other reptiles and birds. Here we go.
Yeah, spot on.
That's good, it's still in position. So what we have here, this is a temperature data logger. We have these positioned at certain points throughout the forest in places where we find certain species of reptile. And by recording the temperatures, we can look at the microclimate that these reptiles prefer. And this is very informative for us if we're looking to translocate, so move them to start a new population. We can then survey the microclimate on other islands to see that it's suitable for them. And we have several out in the forest that are going to be here for a year. And this allows us to monitor the changes throughout the year to determine temperature and humidity fluctuations. We compare this to sites where we don't find reptiles as well, and this allows us to look at comparisons of what they really prefer, whether they like it incredibly moist and damp and not so warm, or whether they like it moist and damp and very warm. And this is the only way we can tell. We also take the body temperatures of the reptiles to see how they're maintaining their temperature in relation to what is available for them as well. It's been really helpful for the captive breeding of the lesser night gecko, and it's allowed us to inform the herpetological department at Durrell Wildlife at what temperatures the geckos need to be held at and the cycle that they need to go through day and night and also yearly to be able to get them to reproduce. Part of the way that we can tell how the changes in abundance of the reptiles is by monitoring their relative abundance in certain areas. So we're going to set up one transect now and then we'll come back later because we're going to be disturbing the vegetation by moving through and putting out this transect line.
I record the time at which I stopped.
We part company with Dr. Cole, who will find some orange-tailed skinks on Gunner's Point, where the translocated population is now thriving. The action taken by the team in 2008 prevented nothing less than the extinction of the orange-tailed skink. Ile de la Pace, the fortress island. The key to Mauritius, according to the British, who decided to take the island from the French in 1810. It guards Maibor Bay. One of the main concerns today is to manage what's left from the past. Not only the historical structures, but also the creatures that live in between the rocks and mortar. Visiting the island may be a nice souvenir, but it can also be deadly for reptiles, such as the Bokeh Skink, which was lost from Flat Island.
Very rare.
How many are there?
On this island, about 150.
Only? Oh.
Yeah.
And that's a grown-up one?
Yes. Okay. This is an adult male.
But these islands are very important because a lot of the pressures that are on mainland Mauritius didn't actually reach some of these small islands. So this is one of the endemic Mauritian reptiles. It's highly endangered. It's only found on a neighbouring island. And over the last few years we've been working with the Ministry of Agriculture to start moving them back to islands where they used to occur. And of course we're working with the National Heritage Fund to not only restore, it's their job to restore the buildings and the heritage, but we're looking also to restore the ecosystem that once occurred on this island. One of the important species that used to exist here is this. This is a Bokeh skink, or Bokeh skink. So currently on this island we have about 150 to 200 individuals. But for a long time, where they're just on the one island, there are only around 400 individuals. That's a global population for this Mauritian animal. But now, through the work that we've been doing, we have about 1,200 in total. So about 150, 200 here, about 600 to 700 over on Ile aux Phare, and of course the 400 on Ile aux Vaques. Well, the biggest threat to these animals is not so much the people that are coming, but what they bring with them. So a lot of littering, and unfortunately plastic bottles, plastic litter that's thrown down entrap animals like this skink, and they can't get out and then they die. So again, working with National Parks Conservation Service, we're doing a lot of clearing up of the rubbish on these islands. We also hope to do a lot of sensitisation, so talking with people, explaining the problems of littering and also fires. And as we know, we had a fire out on Ile aux Vaques last year, and that was a big problem for the island, where we lost almost 20% of the population of skinks.
In October 2012, a carefully planned translocation operation is on the eve of taking place. 60 Keeled Scaled Boas will be flown from Round Island to Gunner's Point after years of preparation. Dani Venkatasamy has been assigned to catch one last specimen of the Keeled Scaled Boa. As a result of conservation actions, it was recently downgraded from endangered to vulnerable on the International Union for Conservation of Nature's Red List of Threatened Species.
L'année, on sort du cratère, là, on a été chercher des boas qu'on va amener, qu'on va translocaliser. Est-ce que c'est facile de les trouver dans ces conditions?
Pas vraiment, mais c'est rodé vraiment. Donc là maintenant, on est sorti du cratère de l'Huron et là-bas, on a un petit peu, enfin pas beaucoup de bois, donc on a rodé.
Et nous trouver dans une boîte qui paraît bien aménagée pour votre confort.
Ouais. Donc chaque boîte en l'air qui est passée, donc on a un trou sur le côté. Donc ça peut mettre l'air et de mettre un bol de l'eau. Donc si bois là, on vit boire de l'eau, donc tout ce qu'il faut. Donc on a un hidden place, donc on a un petit cachette, un petit bol, donc les carottes là-dedans, les cachettes, ça qui est stressé.
Comme ça, il n'est pas pour stresser jusqu'à ce que c'est relogé à notre place.
Et c'est vrai, pour ne pas stresser.
Round Island in the north of Mauritius is one of the few locations within the Mascarenes that has never been invaded by rats. The last location that still maintains a semi-functional endemic reptile community. When sailors from the shipwrecked Sumatra landed on the island by accident in 1750, they found lots of snakes and large lizards. Today, it's much easier to reach Round Island by helicopter. The Druve from the Mauritius Police Force has been asked to fly the precious reptiles to a new location nearby, Gunner's Coin. 40 years ago, scientists could not dream of carrying reptiles away from Round Island. They were too scarce and at risk of extinction. Action was taken to ensure the survival of these species, restoring habitat so that the Keeled Scaled Boa could increase from an estimated 60 individuals remaining to over 1,600 by 2011, thus making the translocation project possible and further reducing the risk of extinction for this unique Mauritian animal. Of the 18 endemic reptiles that once lived in Mauritius, 5 are extinct, and 7 of the remaining 12 are restricted to remnant islets, making them very vulnerable to extinction. Finding new homes within islands that have been made safe for their return is one of the key actions for their future survival. By reintroducing reptiles back to other islets, the conservationists are not only reducing the threats to the species, but also reinstating important services they provide, as the reptiles are pollinators and seed dispersers of threatened Mauritian plants, prey for other Mauritian predators, and are predators themselves, helping to naturally control certain animal groups that would have undesirable impacts on the ecosystem if left unchecked. It took decades to restore Gunner's Coin as a potential habitat for reptiles. Thanks to the assistance of New Zealand, Norway rats and black-naped hares were eradicated in 1995, so were rabbits in 1998. In between 2 bites of a sandwich, we learned that Nicolas de Lacaille visited the islet in 1755. He wrote about seeing a foot-long lizard 1 inch thick, probably the Telfair skink. Those poking their heads at us were reintroduced to Gunner's Coin from their last surviving population on Round Island. 250 of them were selected and released in 2007. After lunch, another 100 will be released at specific locations to enhance the population's bloodline so that this is similar to Round Island. They are simply part of the food chain for boas.
So you see this one is actually sloughing her skin at the moment, so she looks a bit scruffy. She's just changing her clothes basically, changing her skin.
And this won't affect its adaptation to this new land?
No, not at all. She'll be absolutely fine because she's almost sloughed out completely now. So I'm just going to let her go on the rock. Oh, there she goes. She's off. Well, it's really interesting because we've come to a sort of a pivotal point where the population on this island of this skink, which we reintroduced in 2007, has done so well. The population's really increased, and what we're doing by bringing in more individuals over is just to bring in some new blood to make sure that we have the same genetic variability as on Round Island as we do here. And so it's before the population gets too dense, that it then becomes a problem for us to bring in any new individuals. So by bringing more genetic material, we're giving it every opportunity for long-term survival. So pressures, environmental change can have the same selection pressure on this population as it would on Round Island. Nice strong male.
Yeah.
So place him just on the rock over here.
Les translocations, ce qu'on a fait aujourd'hui, c'est quelque chose qui arrive pour la première fois dans l'océan Indien, dans le mascarin. Et nous sommes vraiment très contents parce que c'est un projet qui a pris à peu près 6 ans. On a préparé tout, on a préparé les terrains, on a essayé de voir s'ils vont adapter ici. Mais maintenant, on est très contents de le voir. C'est un projet que le Parc National et le Mauritius Wildlife Foundation et le Durrell Wildlife Trust a fait ensemble. C'est une collaboration exceptionnelle. Et je dirais, voilà, aujourd'hui, le fruit est là.
What we have here is a young female Round Island boa. This is the first time in 150 years that it's not been restricted to Round Island. So it's a nice healthy snake. Oh, it's a little bit lively. If I can hand you the bag. So this is about half size. It's a very unique animal, once found throughout Mauritius. We know this from bone remains down in the Mer Songe, but also from historical records on places like Ile de la Passe. When people first arrived, this snake was recorded on that island. It's also recorded on quite a few other islands as well. And unfortunately, when rats arrived in Mauritius, the boa and the boa's prey, tailfair skinks and a lot of the other reptiles, were lost. And so this boa was predated upon by all of these introduced mammals and just didn't have any food to support it. And this is what makes Round Island so important, because rats weren't introduced to the island. And so the boa and its prey survived. But now, due to the work of the Ministry of Agriculture, the Durrell Wildlife Conservation Trust and the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation, we're able to bring this bird back to areas that have been restored.
Obviously, it's quite a change from Round Island to this place. So what are the chances of adapting here quite naturally?
Well, we've been working a lot over the last 6 years to restore the reptile communities to actually support this snake. And whilst the habitat is very different structurally, it should be able to support, well, we know it will be able to support these snakes, as it has supported the other reptile species that we've been reintroducing. But I might add as well that this concept of actually bringing Round Island boas and Round Island reptiles back to other islands where they used to occur was considered and thought about 35 years ago, so in the 1970s. But unfortunately then, goats and rabbits had denuded Round Island of its vegetation, and the boa population at that time was thought to have been less than 100. And one of the estimates says that there's only 60 individuals on Round Island itself. Now with 60 individuals, that's just too few really to
take large enough populations or large enough number away to initiate a new population. So with the removal of goats and rabbits and a lot of really hard work on Round Island to be able to restore the vegetation has increased the reptile abundance. So it's increased the prey for this boa, and now we have over 1,000 individuals on Round Island. So it's taken a long time for us to get to this stage where we can actually remove individuals and initiate a new population. So this is one of 60 individuals that will be releasing to start this new population, which we hope to see grow. They're completely harmless to people. It's one of the few snakes that can actually change its colour. And so, dependent upon their mood, but also the temperature. If they're cold, they're usually a lot darker. And at night time, they're usually much paler than this in colour. Daytime, they'll get darker. The other name for the Round Island boa is the Keeled Scaled Boa. And it's named because of these keels on each scale. And this is an adaptation to climbing. And so we know that this snake once occurred within the forests of Mauritius. So every snake has a very unique individual pattern. From the vent here, and this pattern of black and white markings on the ventral side of the tail. We've been taking photographs of these. So what is unique about this animal over any other terrestrial vertebrate is it actually has two jaw hinges in its mouth. So all terrestrial vertebrates, just like us, we have one hinge here that allows your mouth to open and close. These have a special adaptation by having a second jaw on the top. Just hold her head a moment. On the top of her jaw, just below where the eyes are. And this actually allows not only for her jaw to move like this, but also like that. And this is an adaptation for eating barrel-shaped reptiles, such as skinks. You imagine they're very smooth-skinned, that if you just got hold of it by closing your mouth like that, there's a big opportunity that the animal would be able to roll out of the mouth. Now, other reptiles that have adapted to eating skinks have developed very long teeth at the front, so when they bite, the skink can't move out of the mouth. But these have chosen, or these have been selected to actually have a completely different mechanism by allowing this top jaw to hinge round, so it's actually gripping hold of the skink, and so the skink can't escape. And once they've got a bite hold, they'll actually constrict. These are completely non-venomous, but they'll bite hold of the skink and then wrap round of it and constrict it. So every time the skink breathes in, it will tighten its coils a little bit more to stop it from expanding its ribs to take another breath.
How long does it take to eat a skink?
It's usually anything from 30 minutes to 50 minutes. It's quite a long process because first of all it's quite interesting actually to watch when they're hunting. They'll go through the vegetation and they'll actually select a skink. They'll actually go up to certain skinks and they'll be tasting, and you can see her tongue flickering now, and she's actually tasting the air, just seeing what's about, and it's each of those parts of the tongue will be picking up almost taste in stereo, and she can be able to detect where a skink is to the left or to the right. And so when they're hunting, they'll go through and taste for skinks, and they'll select one that's of the right size for what they need, the right size that they can manage. Then she'll bite hold of it and constrict round, and that may take up to 15 or 20 minutes until the snake is happy that the skink is dead. Then what she'll do is unrelease the coils, and she'll find the head of the skink, and then they'll dislocate their jaws usually and work their mouth over the skink and swallow it whole. So they can actually eat quite large prey in relation to the size of their body. So she could quite easily fit, like the 3 fingers, she could quite easily swallow. So dislocate the jaw back here, and then each part of the mouth works its way over its prey. What's it looking like, Rip? Is there a lot there?
They had a cousin on White Island. No one has seen them for decades now. Did they have the same kind of attributes?
Unfortunately, we know very little about the ecology of the Burrowing Boa. It was last seen in 1975, and only 4 were actually encountered in the 20th century. So very, very few encounters, and unfortunately, as much as we've hoped to find it, we haven't. With the amount of work effort on Round Island, we think sadly that it's gone. But because of the actions taken to conserve Round Island, we still have this snake.
A walk through the dense vegetation at night allows some interesting encounters. On our way to release boas, we come across a lesser night gecko, the same that was reintroduced on Île Marianne, but was lost from Flat Island.
So this little fellow is very hard to detect at night.
Yeah, they're very well camouflaged, as you can see from the pattern. To actually see them on the rocks that they naturally are found on is very, very difficult, and it's usually just from their eye shine that we can see them. But this is the lesser night gecko, Nactus coindemerensis. So its name is actually longer than the gecko itself. This is an adult female, and she's actually got an egg inside her. They only produce 1 egg at a time. It's the smallest of the Mauritian reptile species and only found in Mauritius. It was once widespread throughout much of Mauritius. We still have a small population down in the southeast, but the biggest population is here on this island. It was only discovered in the early 1980s, but by the mid-1990s it was thought to have gone extinct. And this was because of rats that were on this island, but because of the eradication of the rats, this species has made a fantastic recovery. And we now have between 16 and 20,000 of them on this island. So it's a real conservation success. The removal of this problematic invasive species has led to this really, really successful recovery of this Mauritian endemic. This species is nocturnal. They do occur in very high densities, and they tend to eat just small moths. So they sit on a rock and just wait for a small moth or a caterpillar to walk past it. So they're sit and wait predators, and they usually just come out of their crevices at night and spend most of their night just in a small area. But we've found that in the right habitat, with the right amount of food, they can occur at very, very high densities, and it would have been historically one of the most abundant vertebrates in pristine Mauritius. And this would have been important for a lot of the other reptiles and possibly a lot of the birds that were active at night, such as the night owl, the scops owl. And so it would have been an important part of the Mauritian food chain.
The vegetation is full of surprises. Without notice, the scientists capture a creature you would not welcome in your tent. A scorpion, the endemic Leurs serratus. At the time of shooting, it was thought extinct and presumed to be the more common Isometries Maculatus. But in 2013, the team managed to confirm that this Mauritian scorpion still exists, since it was last collected in 1868.
So this is probably the most dangerous thing on this island for us.
Yeah, certainly. We come across these all the time whilst we're working, and you have to be very careful where you sit down and when you open up your boxes, because they're very, very common on quite a few of the islands. And their sting, if you can see there, packs quite a punch, and you feel it for about 3 or 4 days. But these are native to Mauritius. They're found on quite a few of the islands in the Indian Ocean.
Potentially, what's the danger for all the animals you're introducing here?
Most of the animals, like the Telfair skink, actually see this as quite a tasty meal, and the sting doesn't seem to affect them at all. So we often see the Telfairs on Round Island and here actually coping with them very easily. So they usually very quickly bite into them and gobble them up. But for us, yeah, it's a little bit of a issue, especially when we're in the forests and searching and moving through dead wood and leaf litter. We have to be very careful. This is Isometries Maculatus is the scientific name. It's a female, and you can tell. Just see those feathers on the underside? Those two white areas. The males have really long feathers on the underside of the body, and what they do, they deposit a packet of sperm in a little silk packet, and they'll dance and hold on to the female's front claws, and they'll move around, and he'll pull the female round until she scoops up this little packet. And it's really interesting to watch how they move around with one another. But it's much easier to watch them than actually get up and close and personal with them like this. Ooh, let's lift her up. So.
Now is the moment we have been waiting for tonight, and let nature have its way.
On prend the blood sample, on screen it for one diseases, so là, on check the health status. Après ça, qu'ils ont décidé si capable de transloquer ici. Et là, nous transloquer, on fait une boîte comme ça, pour capable mettre dedans, safely, directement safely. Là, les doigts, ils commencent à sortir, ils commencent à guetter un peu sur l'environnement. Ils commencent à habituer, et puis dans le nouvel environnement, ils vont guetter un coup qu'il peut faire. Là, nous allons suivre ce mouvement qu'il fait pendant le release. Bon, prendre l'air et qui ban geste qu'il fait. À partir de là, nous sommes capables de décider quelle action je vais faire par ici, ou bien comment je vais réagir pour release dans ce nouveau environnement.
A new dawn on Gunner's Coin that promises a better future for our rarest reptiles. Since 2006, the Mauritius Reptile Recovery Program has worked to protect 11 islets. They have focused their efforts on reducing or preventing the extinction of 7 highly threatened reptile species. Thanks to the efforts from local authorities, NGOs and international organizations, there has been a remarkable recovery in reptile populations. Conservation efforts from the 1970s have allowed reptile abundance to increase by an average of 2,000% across all the species of concern on the islands, with recent efforts by the reptile team to further enhance the distribution of the reptile species by over 6,000%, and have prevented the extinction of the orange-tailed skink. It has been a long way, but the ecosystem and the biodiversity of Mauritius are still under threat by man-made or natural catastrophes. Saving our rarest reptiles is a relentless task, a commitment that continues through dedicated Mauritians with international support to preserve a legacy for future generations.